Welcome to Forthright. I am Sulani Madsen and bringing you an audio podcast of my weekly newspaper column, this one inspired by a breakout session on media coverage of polarizing issues. From the Spokesman Review, as published Thursday, July 4th, 2024, and corrected July 11th, 2024, more on that correction later, and titled, First Amendment Protects the Second Amendment. Every gun death is tragic. Finding effective solutions to prevent tragedy and respect the right to bear arms under the Second Amendment requires access to data and the inquisitive journalism protected by the First Amendment. Good reporting starts with a question of curiosity. Investigative reporter John Diedrich of the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel wanted to know why gun deaths in Wisconsin had doubled in the past 20 years. His multi-part series, Behind the Gun, wouldn't have been possible without a 9-month-long Marquette University fellowship with access to journalism students as research assistants. Diedrich described the process at a session on depolarizing media at the Braver Angels National Convention held last weekend at Carthage College in Kenosha, Wisconsin. What he found behind the trend in rising gun deaths didn't match the typical progressive campaign to reduce gun deaths by banning bump stocks and limiting magazine capacity. State-level data showed homicides, accidents, and shootings deemed justified, put together, do not account for even 1/3 of all gunshot deaths in Wisconsin, according to the series. The driving factor is suicide. You don't need faster trigger speed or a high-capacity magazine to fire one deadly shot. Good reporting was easier than getting good data. There was limited detail to the data made available at a state level, so his team contacted all 73 Wisconsin counties. The results were another surprise. After taking Milwaukee County and its nearly 600,000 residents out of the equation, the highest rates of gun deaths per capita were not urban, but rural, and over 70% were suicide. The key question is, how can we have good mental health practices while maintaining rights, said Diedrich in a follow-up interview. When solutions come from non-gun owners, they come with rights restrictions, end quote. Diedrich estimated at least 80% of his team's more than 250 interviews were with gun owners, with surprisingly complex responses. We have to have voluntary first steps because involuntary steps are a barrier, Diedrich said. One of the most effective in Wisconsin and other states has been the Gun Shop Project. It's a grassroots effort that has been largely unknown to people who are not gun owners, end quote. The Gun Shop Project provides training and information to gun shop owners and staff on suicide intervention, advising them to trust their intuition and have those tough conversations with an impulsive buyer. It goes further to provide a way for a current gun owner to temporarily create time and distance from usually his, firearms while he deals with mental health recovery. It works like this. A Wisconsin gun owner, accompanied by a trusted friend, takes his firearms to a trusted local gun shop and checks them in for cleaning, no questions asked. No government involvement. To pick them back up, the pair return together after the crisis has passed. For Spokane suicide awareness activist Philip Tyler, who threw himself into prevention work after the death of his son, the Wisconsin protocol is attractive. We're working with local gun shops to get information out there on suicide awareness, but hadn't had a program like that considered. It lessens the burden on the person who is struggling to also deal with a fear the government is going to be involved, end quote. Diedrich said the Wisconsin program was started by gun owners and gun shops who took the initiative without state action. It's a grassroots effort that has been largely unknown to people who are not gun owners, said Diedrich. Tyler acknowledged the complexity and angst over government-issued extreme risk protection orders creates barriers to getting help. Quote, our goal as peer advocates is to create that space between those thoughts, those incidents, and then we know we save people. I trust my local gun shop. It's something I do for my neighbors, end quote. Neighbors need to be part of the solution. Diedrich cited work by Kathy Barber, a senior researcher at the Harvard Injury Control Research Center at Harvard's T.H. Chan School of Public Health, indicating about 1/3 of gun owners in Utah had used an informal hold my guns arrangement with a friend or family member. Handing over your firearms to a friend or family member for temporary storage is illegal in 100% background check states, although Washington's statute has some exceptions. It's the kind of unintended consequences that are inevitable when laws are written without input of those governed by them. Washington's single-party controlled legislature has focused on passing laws making it more difficult for those local trusted gun shops to stay in business, and tinkering with firearms accessories. It's why journalists breaking apart the political binary is essential to good governance. Diedrich said he was most surprised by how complex and contradictory the issue is, at least by the normal lines between gun control and gun rights. It actually points to places to work together. Digging into the Second Amendment debate with fairness has made him a magnet for conservative voices eager to find a hearing from those practicing responsibly under the First Amendment. Now that I've done this story, Diedrich said, there's lots of stories coming out, and there's not a lot of competition in this space. So I've experienced some of that John Diedrich explained. As the designated conservative columnist for the Spokesman Review, I do get phone calls from people who say, "Hey, I have a story idea, but I don't think I trust the media," and that's too bad. I like the way this column came together, but last week I screwed up, and there will be a correction in newsprint and online. My columns are published in the Thursday edition, so if a correction is necessary, it goes in the following Thursday. If you look at the clipping of the column from the print edition and compare it to what I just read, you'll notice they don't match in one small way. This is the correction my editor and I worked out for publication on July 11th. Quote, Washington state law allows some exceptions for the temporary transfer of firearms. The July 4 column by Sulani Madsen, First Amendment protects the Second Amendment, incorrectly stated the impact of the state's background check law in regards to people experiencing mental health issues, end quote. The correction was made after alert reader Michael Stanger wrote to my editor with this pithy feedback on the July 4th column. And Michael said, if you're going to keep printing Mrs. Madsen's essays despite their logical failings, can you at least fact check them? Temporary transfer of a firearm to prevent injury or death is absolutely legal in Washington so long as the recipient can legally possess it, end quote. While I push back on his opinion on the logic of my arguments, he is right about the facts. I screwed up when I didn't check the statute. Washington is a 100% background check state, but we do have exceptions. And as it turns out, my mistake is a great example of the media issues that we did discuss at the breakout session in Wisconsin. Journalism is a business with a struggling financial model. Less money translates into less time, which is why Diedrich never would have been able to spend the time he did digging into the topic of gun deaths without a fellowship stipend and access to research assistance. It's a job, it has deadlines, and it's easy to let a looming deadline lead to a missed fact check when writing in a hurry. I let time have control, and I missed the fact check on whether Washington's 100% background check had exceptions for informal temporary transfers. My editor is really good about pressing me on details, and she does fact check columns. But she also has time crunches and trusts me to have checked the basics. This one is all on me. The second lesson to be learned from the necessity of a correction is how bias affects judgment on what needs checking, what needs that little extra bit of time, or why you should question what you think you know, especially when media is covering polarized issues like gun rights and gun deaths. When a remark from a source fits the narrative in a journalist's head, it's easy to fall into the trap of letting it slide. As a legal gun owner who has mostly given up on anything sensible coming out of the legislature on gun policy, I let that bias color my perception of whether that fact needed checking. Bias in an opinion column is not necessarily a problem if the bias is about something people simply have different opinions about, but getting the facts straight still matters. Thank you for being a reader, Mr. Stanger, and taking the time to provide feedback. I hope you're a subscriber because locally sourced news matters and subscribers are still key. As always, reference links are included on the Substack post of this week's background reading. You're invited to subscribe for notifications of new content on a variety of regional topics with or without a pledge, and thank you for listening.